All right, Chloe. Like I said before, thanks so much for doing this. My first question to you is tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you started in the mental health community.
Thanks for having me, Laszlo. Definitely, my name is Chloe Lee-Tjenos. I am a clinical and medical support hypnotherapist. So I've been doing this work for several years. I have a private clinical practice up in Queen Anne in Seattle, if you're familiar. I got into this work based on my own personal experience and just seeing how um, positive change can be so accessible and fast and seemingly easy when we connect to this subconscious and these deeper levels of awareness. So I have been a yoga teacher for many years, been doing nature and forest therapy for years as well. And then hypnotherapy was sort of my next step to finding that sense of connection in my community and providing space for people to connect with themselves and heal.
So tell me a little bit about hypnotherapy. I've never heard of this before. So for the audience, could you give a little detail as to what that is?
Gladly. Um, Hypnosis is a natural brain state. In fact, like all of us experience hypnosis at least twice per day. First thing when we wake up in the morning, and then right before we fall asleep at night. So, hypnosis is when the brain, like you and I right now, Laszlo, are like in this sort of outward focused alpha, beta brainwave state where we're focused on each other and the outer world. And when we're very much asleep in deep sleep, we're doing quite the opposite, like a delta theta brainwave state where the body's like shut down, healing, regenerating. Hypnosis is what happens in between those places. So the brain is going like alpha, beta, delta theta, alpha, beta, delta theta. And so that's kind of the reason why, you know how we're not supposed to look at our phones first thing in the morning or right before we go to sleep. And that's because the brain, when it's in that in between space, it's a very natural place to be, but it just so happens that the subconscious mind and these deeper levels of awareness are very open when the brain is in that place. So, therapeutically, we can learn to, and I teach my clients to cultivate that state in their brain. So they learn how to get into that brainwave pattern and to sustain and stay there so that while they're in that openness to the subconscious, we can do really good work with reprogramming nervous system, working with emotions, memories, beliefs, and the like. I like to say, if you've experienced talk therapy, we're thinking like conscious mind, learning to tell your story, putting the pieces of yourself together and analyzing it and making it make sense. And then when you start to ask yourself, okay, I see the story, I can put it all together, I can even maybe understand why these things are happening within me and why my behavior is the way it is. But then how do I really change my behavior and my nervous system? That's when we go to the subconscious and say, okay, let's look at this level of programming and figure out how to make the body and the mind operate in this new and positive way.
hmm Yeah, I just feel like oftentimes, when we're so like you said, even when we wake up, we don't know. We can't keep our eyes off of phones because it's just so weird. It's
Yeah. Yeah. And the reality is those first couple moments when you're waking up and those last couple moments before you go to sleep, whatever you're thinking, whatever you're looking at, whatever you're doing, has the potential to make a deep impact on your subconscious mind. And that's just a part of the normal way we operate, which is just a good thing to know. Maybe that helps us make a more conscious decision about like what's your first thought when you wake up in the morning, what's your last thought before you go to sleep. And it's also interesting to know that there's some potential for that in between space where you could really make some positive changes for yourself, even first thing in the morning, if your first thought is, woohoo, yay, this is going to be great, that could influence your entire day, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My next question is, tell me a little bit about what goes on in the therapy room when you're working with clients, who are having, you know, trouble with sleep or whatever issues they may have. How do you sort of use that sort of hypnosis sort of technique to sort of help alleviate clients' problems?
Yeah, great question. Well, a session with me looks probably familiar, like any therapy session starts, as in like my clients come and we sit down together and we just talk about, if we've been working together for a while, we're doing some like updates on progress. We're talking about the events of the week since we've seen each other, and also talking about the markers of positive progress and sort of what are we looking at. That gives us a picture of how we're doing and a good jumping off point for the work of the day. Then by the time someone has made it through a first session with me, they already know how to take themselves into hypnosis. So then after that little chit chat at the beginning, I will assist my clients in guiding themselves into hypnosis so they become very physically relaxed. And then the mind is very focused. And then I will verbally guide a client through, anywhere between 20 and 40 minutes of them being in hypnosis. And we'll use lots of techniques and protocols to sort of essentially go into that subconscious layer and discover, what are the limiting self thoughts and programs that are driving an undesirable pattern. So, for example, feeling anxiousness or pain or any of the many things, having a disrupted sleep cycle. And when we discover those limitations, then we're able to transform them. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Sometimes that idea can be reshaped into a positive idea that can drive positive behavior. Sometimes that self-thought or limitation is linked to an old memory or an old association that we can sort of reframe. And when all that work is done in hypnosis, it makes a very positive, permanent change at that subconscious layer. Interestingly, and really importantly, Laszlo, it's not just the subconscious that is accessible and working during a hypnosis session. There's a deeper level of awareness still that I call superconscious or problem-solving intelligence. And that's each of us have this connection to what is, some of us call it like intuition or higher self or love or unity consciousness. But this idea that there's something inside each of us that knows what the next best step is. And getting the information from that part of my clients is really where the self-connection and empowerment happens. Then we do work to add new positive ideas in the session as well. And then it's essentially, they bring themselves out of hypnosis, we do a little debrief, and then they get to go home feeling better. And then we meet again and keep working.
Mm-hmm. How does this particular sort of therapy differ from, for example, cognitive behavioral therapy or ketamine based therapy, relational therapy? How is this different in its own way?
Yeah. Well, during a hypnotherapy session, we're the body and mind are in this very particular configuration. So the body is in a parasympathetic state. That means that all of your body's systems are relaxed and doing their healing work anytime you're in hypnosis. So the whole amount of time that someone's in hypnosis in a session, for example, their digestive system is working for them, their respiration is regulated, their heart rate is regulated, and there's healing work happening at a physiological level just by the nature of them being in hypnosis. And the other thing that's really special about it is that because of this, the perfection of the hypnotic state, all of the parts of the mind. So we're talking about conscious thinking mind, analytical mind, subconscious mind, this, I call it the great doer, the behavior driver, your nervous system, and that super conscious higher awareness are all present and participating in that healing process. Um, Having all of the aspects of the mind, it's almost like if you could gather up all of your attention and just focus on one thing for like 40 minutes, and it feels so good. That allows a lot of work to happen really quickly for my clients. Um, I would also say that it's very different than, I would say that's how it differs from talk therapy. Um, in that we do access that analytical mind and reflect on behaviors. But there's also a subconscious programming component that's really important. How it differs from, for example, ketamine therapy is that the we're asking for the full participation of all of the parts of the mind during the session. In ketamine session, for example, there's a dissociative effect where aspects of self are not available, and that creates different conditions for healing. So hypnotherapy is all parts online, all at the same time, all healing together. And that's why it causes a lot of rapid progress for people. The other thing I'll say, interestingly, is that I help a lot of my clients um, integrate and make meaning from uh, ketamine and other psychedelic experiences. So, for example, when somebody goes into a ketamine experience, on the tail end of that, there's work to do to sort of bring those positive benefits into the nervous system and make them really last and land. That type of work is served very well with hypnosis as well.
Mm-hmm. My next question is, what sort of added benefits from a research standpoint have you seen this type of therapy, hypnosis therapy, like on clients? In other words, what benefit does that sort of have? I don't know if you've seen research about this, but
Yeah, there's quite a bit of research about it. Actually, interestingly, like there's one NIH study that studied one of the specific protocols that I use um, as compared to a sort of conventional medical approach to urinary incontinence. So essentially, there's two groups of people in this clinical study. One group of people had our sort of typical cadence of hypnotherapy sessions, just like I would run them in the same vein. And then the other group of people had a traditional medical and pharmaceutical approach to overcoming their urinary incontinence. And what was found in that study is that the people who experienced hypnotherapy had just as good of results, actually greater results, because what hypnotherapy did was allow them to address the emotional and social issues that were around their medical condition. So a lot of work that I do with people, for example, with chronic illness or with behavioral patterns, is a really comprehensive work that helps people not only address the cycles of pain or the cycles of the body that may be repetitive and uncomfortable. But we also get to address the emotional and the self-esteem and the self-thought layer of the experience. So it helps people heal in a very comprehensive way. Yes, I could go on and on about research, but it's there's a lot to be said for healing all aspects of self and you.
mm-hmm. My next question is, what have you learned in doing this kind of work? In other words, like have like in terms of like talking to patients, what have you learned in terms of like some of the common themes that they bring up in those sessions? And also, what do you still hope to learn as a clinician in terms of learning something new? This is a two-part question.
I love it. I love it. I will say from my clients, I have learned something that I said earlier, but I've seen it in action time after time after time. And that is that every single person has within them the intelligence to guide themselves to heal. Um, and the best case scenario, Laszlo, is if I can use my skillfulness to create the conditions that allow that intelligence to emerge. But the truth of it is, I have not met one person who doesn't have that deep, intelligent intuition for healing. Um, and connecting to that is incredibly liberating. Um, and then what do I hope to learn? I hope to continue to learn how to adapt my practice to include many different minds. I've had the privilege, I would say, in this last year of working with more and more clients who have autism or just are neurodivergent in these different ways that people manifest. And what I've found to be so interesting is the potential and power of people's imaginations and the different ways that we conceptualize self and healing in this space. And it can look so many different ways. So I would hope for myself in my learning that I would continue to get to meet people who have unique perspectives and can bring that to the table, because there's nothing more fascinating to me than learning about people's minds and experiencing the potential of that healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as long as you tap into those groups, that'll you'll open your mind to new things.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, there's inspiring intelligence and imagination to heal that is, I feel very, very blessed and lucky to work with all of my clients. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, to kind of wrap this up, what advice, tips, would you give to students, people who are thinking about entering the mental health community and wanting to learn more about hypnotherapy or just mental health in general? What advice would you give? Tips?
Um, I would say that mind science and mind healing and healing through healing the body through the mind and healing the mind through the body, this dual way it works. And also the healing tradition of trance and adjusted consciousness is global, it's historical, it's traditional, and for anyone specifically interested in hypnotherapy, I would just say learn from the global perspective. Part of the learning is academic. It's a lot of skillfulness, it's a lot of understanding from a scientific perspective, and also the art of using imagination and using the mind to heal is a lineage tradition that is passed down for thousands and thousands of years from all of these sources around the world. And so studying Eastern and Western philosophy, Eastern and Western perspectives on the mind, having a really diverse input of ways to talk about the human experience, I think is the greatest asset to being able to speak to the work that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. All right.